Went to a college in a small town in Mississippi. Worked at a grocery store. We had some very strange local characters come in daily. No one was too weird. Except for this one guy. I had been working there maybe 3 months when this guy walks in, stomping his feet with every step, grabs a basket, and speeds his way around the store. Me being the people watcher I am, I just said, "What the hell is this guy's deal?" and kept watching him. I was a cashier there, and he decided that he needed to check out in my line. I thought it was a little weird because the rest of the cashiers there that day were all attractive college girls. I'm a dude. I tried to make small talk with him. And he explained to me that he had been held captive in the woods in the Carolinas for the past 70 days. And something like that with the government running experiments on him. Obviously, an immediate red flag with this guy's appearance: tall, overweight, with a bushy beard, long hair, and sunglasses. And what he was telling me, I needed him just to leave, I have to ring him up in him pan. He went to stand at the entrance, where he just stared outside at his rate van that he pulled up in, facing back and forth and huffing loudly. After doing this for maybe 5 minutes, he walked out, hopped in his van and drove off, thinking I'd never have to deal with that again. I sighed and laughed it off. A couple of more months went by, and he came back. And so it went. He began a few weeks to months and return once and weave again. He'd always come to me and me only and tell me these crazy stories of how he was abducted, and that the hide in the woods and Smoky Mountains, about how he was abducted and this and that. He even went so far as to explain to me what the inside of the spaceship looked like. You're probably wondering why I never called the cops. Well, I'm a skeptical person, for one. And two, I thought it was extremely interesting. There wasn't causing anyone harm. And I got a kick out of it. Until one day, he came in acting extra sporadic and extra paranoid. A pregnant woman was standing next to him in one of the aisles and turned to make small talk. I know this because I always kept my eye on the sky. He attacked the woman and punched her repeatedly in the stomach. He was shouting, "You're harboring one of them, and I'll kill you if you don't kill it." Some extremely psychotic behavior. A few of the near men, including myself, jumped in and had to subdue this guy until the police arrived. By the time they got there, he had come down to his normal self and left with them. He told the police he didn't have any identity, because it was erased by the government. I told them all of the accounts I've had with this guy, and no one ever knew of anything to come from it. Thankfully, the woman didn't actually suffer any severe trauma to her or her baby. Another 1.5 years went by. And I never saw this guy again. Hopefully, he's long gone and locked up. In a small town. Less than 5,000 people, and the majority of the population is made up of students. But of course there are also locals. I never had a problem with any of the locals before, but they could be a tad strange. So about 7 months ago, I was at the grocery store around 6 p.m. buying food for dinner. I was in the dairy aisle looking for cottage cheese. We were making lasagna. When from behind me, this man asked me why I was buying cottage cheese. I turned around and there was a man standing there, probably in his late 40s, early 50s, with long greasy ponytail, dirty clothes. Something about him made me feel uncomfortable. However, I'm very polite and a little too nice. So I engaged in the conversation with him. I'm making lasagna tonight and the recipe calls for it. I'm a professional chef. Let me tell you that you should not be using cottage cheese. You should be using ricotta, he says. I said thanks for the advice and picked up the ricotta. I was about to walk away when he continued conversation. He was going on about really weird things. Like how he used to have a white tiger as a pet. I thought he was delusional. And now he makes homemade hot sauce out of his house. At this point, I'd probably been standing there listening to him for 20 minutes. Do you like hot sauce? Yeah, sometimes you should come to my place and make hot sauce with me. I just live up the mountain. No thanks. It's okay. The man starts getting really pushy and trying to persuade me to go to his house. Finally, this woman who was overhearing a weird conversation, and who could see was getting very unnerved, said it was time for him to be on his way. He then proceeds to give me his business card, which I may add was clearly homemade on regular printer paper and cut with scissors. He tells me to call him whenever I want to make hot sauce or have a drink. He went to the cashier to pay for his stuff, and then watched to make sure he left before going to pay for my things. When I walked out at the grocery store, he was standing outside waiting for me. Now I'm really freaked out and have a good 15-minute walk ahead of Maine. He asked me how I was getting home. And I didn't want to say I was walking, so I told him I was going to catch a cab. "We'll share a cab." "No, just share a cab with me." He was starting to get angry. So I flagged down a cab and I jumped in. He tries to get in the back. But I tell the cab driver that I don't know this man. And I don't want him sharing a cab with me. So he tells him to get lost. As we're driving away, I can hear him yell, "Fucking bitch." Pretty shaken at this point. The cab driver drops me off at my house. When I get out, I see a car with the creepy man from the grocery store in it parked 2 houses down. He not only followed me to my house, but also had a car of his own. There was no reason for him to want to take a taxi with me. Now I was super scared and hurried inside. Thank God my 2 other roommates were both home. I told them everything that happened. One of my roommate's boyfriends was on his way over. So we decided to wait for him to get there before we did anything else. He just stayed there in his car watching our house for a good 15 minutes when he saw my friend's boyfriend show up, drove away, and then never saw him since. I then remembered that he gave me his business card. And I wanted to look him up online. First of all, the business card was for some photoshopping company, not chef. I typed the name and business into Google. And nothing came up. His name did not exist and the company didn't exist either. I reported this instance to the police, but they said there was not much they could do since he didn't technically do anything. I'm not sure if this is related or not. But I have a gut feeling it was less than a week later. My roommates had class at 8:30 a.m. And I was still sleeping since I didn't have class until noon. I guess whoever last left forgot to lock the door. About an hour after they left, I woke up to the front door being closed, thinking it was just one of my roommates. I thought the door would have been locked. So whoever would have needed to key night just stayed in bed. I heard someone go into my roommate's room right next to mine, thinking it was her. And then a few moments later, I hear someone try my door. I lock it when I sleep at night and knock. But I was so tired. I didn't want to get up and open it. So I just pretended to be asleep. Or thank God for that. Because none of my roommates were home. And it was actually an intruder or heard whoever it was leave through the back door, which I thought was weird. So I got up and got dressed. And when I went out, no one was there. But turns out whoever it was still my roommate's laptop, and a picture we have in our living room of us for girls. Creepy. I reported all this to police, but never really heard anything back of it. I had lots of trouble sleeping and feeling safe in my own house after this incident. To this day, this experience creeps me out. And I don't want to imagine what would have happened if I opened my bedroom door to whoever was knocking. 2 years ago, I was working at my old job as a cashier at a grocery store. I was really friendly to all my customers and most of them loved me. One liner was working late round 8 or 9, but the store was still decently packed. I had a big line of customers and was smiling and being nice to all of them. When this man appeared next in line. He was roughly 5'10" with shoulder length and black greasy hair that was under a cap, a long green jacket and an old black backpack slung over one shoulder. His face was extremely pale, and he had big black glasses that kept sliding down. Since he came up to ring out his items, something felt wrong. However, me being the silly person I am, just smiled at him and was polite. Big mistake, he responded to nothing that I said. He just gave me this creepy dead-eye stare and wouldn't take his eyes off of me, even while paying for his food with his card. I was totally creeped out. But I kept smiling and told him to have a nice night. After he left, I felt a lot better, and the people after him were very sweet and non-creepy. Fast forward an hour, I look up and see him. He was standing by the exit of the store, just staring at me, not moving. I stop what I'm doing for a second and just stare back in shock. I don't say anything to my supervisor or my bagger. I just freeze and stare back. However, my customer snaps me out of it by asking me a question, and they look away to help them out. And when I look back, he is gone. I'm a little unnerved at this point, but I shrug it off and go back to work. Fast forward another 30 minutes. It's almost time to leave, and I'm looking forward to going home and relaxing, when I feel like someone besides my current customer is watching me. I look around and I see nothing, but I still feel like someone has watched me. So I look behind me, and Barry is standing in the second exit right behind me, just staring. I tell my bagger, who shrugs it off. When I look back, he is gone again. Now I am definitely creeped out. So I told my supervisor, since I'm leaving in 30 minutes, and she tells me one of the guys will walk me to my car. Fast forward another 30 minutes. It's time to go, and I'm walking out with one of the cart guys. I start telling him about the creepy guy I saw. And he goes, "Oh yeah, that guy." I look at him in confusion. And he tells me that this guy has been hanging out in the parking lot for the last hour and a half, just watching the store and not moving a set. He thought he was weird, but didn't think twice about it. And that the guy suddenly got up and ran away 5 to 10 minutes ago. The whole ride home, I kept checking my rearview mirror to see if anyone was following me. But nothing. I never saw that guy again. When I was in college, I worked at an after-hours emergency clinic. My shift ended at midnight. And since the stores were much less crowded at that hour, I often did grocery shopping. Then I'm a female. That was in my early 20s. When this happened, I go to the local store one night after work, park in a great spot, since the lawn is almost empty, and head toward the store. As I'm walking across the lot, I hear a male voice calling, "Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me." I look to my right and see a man sitting in a blue station wagon about 5 spaces away from where I'd park, having my attention now. They says, "I'm sorry to bother you. My wife and I are trying to get home, but we've run out of gas. She's in the store now asking people for help. Could you spare a few dollars so he can get gas to go home?" Now normally, I don't mind helping someone out who's down on his luck, but something just felt so odd about this situation. I replied that I was sorry, but didn't have any cash. I went into the store to grab the few things I needed. And the whole time I was inside, I could just not shake the uneasy feeling I got from that guy. I was completely on edge by the time I made it to the checkout line. After I paid for my items, I started to walk out, but my body just didn't want to cooperate. I'd take a few more steps, then I'd stop again. I turned back to the male cashier and said, "I know about the sound like such a girl, but could you see if someone could walk me out to my car? There was a creepy guy out there earlier, and I just don't feel comfortable." He took some of my bags in his hands so it wouldn't be so obvious that he was just escorting me, and said he'd walked me out since he didn't have any customers. To exit the store, you have to go through 2 sets of sliding double doors. We walked through the first set and I stopped cold. The freaking station wagon was now parked next to my car. I told the cashier this, and he told me that he wouldn't let anything happen to me. We walked through the second set of double doors and started walking towards my car. About this time, the station wagon starts up and the driver pulls out of the parking lot. It was then that I noticed that there was no wife in the car, but there was another man. I don't know what these guys were planning to do. And I'm glad I never had to find out, thanks to my impromptu bodyguard. I was grocery shopping by myself a few years ago in a store that I never liked, because it was kind of dark inside for a grocery store. But they had great sales. So I occasionally went. I was rolling along in the dairy aisle and pasta, read some labels. I was standing close to a man. And at some point, I looked up and was just staring at me. I always think it's weird when people stare, and was just going to look away and mind my business. But the second I looked up, he says, "Hey," and the way he said it made me feel like I knew him, and was just forgetting who he was. So I greeted him. As soon as the word "hi" left my mouth, he came even closer to me, and was asking me how I was doing and what I was shopping for. I gave short but nice answers because I still got the impression he knew me when I didn't remember him, and was still trying to inch my cart away. But then he asked if I would like to go on a date. And I thanked him, but told him I had a boyfriend. I started to walk away again. But he started walking with me. So I stopped. He then started asking me if I was sure, and started offering me no strings attached sex and telling me that no one had to know. I still declined, but he just kept going. No strings attached. One night stand. Just a hookup. No sex, just touching, oral sex. I replied no to every offer he had that involved us having any type of relationship other than this grocery store moment we were having. He then tells me that I'm his perfect girl that he's imagined. And he really has to try and don't do anything if I just say yes. I said no. He gives up at this point. And I walk away from him. Finally, I continue my shopping, turned into an aisle where no one else was. I was looking at a shelf when I turned and saw the guy coming down the aisle towards me. Now it's been like 20 minutes. And I had started to forget the whole thing because it was innocent enough, just kind of desperate. But when I saw him coming towards me in a totally different aisle than before, with no groceries of his own this time, I was like, what the fuck? He approaches me and tells me that he's already left the store, but had to come back one more time because he just couldn't let go of the idea of him and me being together. He repeated all of his earlier offers to have discreet sex, and told me he really just wanted to get me into bed so badly. I gave him this look to let him know that I was over it, and told him no again. He says okay, and starts to walk away. But halfway down the aisle, he turns around, comes back, and asks if I'm sure. Yes, still sure. I tell him. I was almost done with my shopping. But I stopped to text my friend to tell her how weird this guy was. And to leave some sort of evidence if he was waiting for me underneath my car or something and kidnap me. When I left the store, it was dark, but the parking lot was busy. I threw my groceries into my car, and freaking out a little bit, I booked it out of there. About a year or so later, I went to an event my company was hosting that had different restaurants providing samples for the guests to walk around and try. I was sitting with my coworker near a fancy restaurant's table and was waiting to snag the good stuff. When I glanced up and looked dead into the eyes of the creepy guy from the grocery store, I almost fell out of my chair, and never thought I'd see him again, let alone less than 5 feet from me working my company's event. Apparently, he was a manager at the fancy restaurant we were waiting to try samples from. Ditched the idea of trying their food and asked my co-workers to walk around the event with me while I told them who I saw. Glance back to see who I was talking about. And one of them replied, "He must be talking about the guy who was staring dead at you." Huh. I looked over towards him. And sure enough, he was just staring at me. No smile, no expression at all. Just a blank, dead-on stare. I tried to ignore him and mingle with the guests staying on the other side of the room from him. But every time I would glance his way, he was staring expressionless and direct, and never left my coworker's side, and left well before the event was over. So I knew that he would still be working and couldn't follow me to offer me any kinds of sex. I read a bunch of comments from people who one was mentioned how they hate the stories about women being creeped out by men who are just innocently flirting. I'm sorry, but it can be really unnerving being a woman who was approached by someone who just really has the creeper vibe to them. I know many women who agree there was an innocent flirting, and then there is just straight, creepy. When I was younger, my mom and I used to ride bikes around my neighborhood together. One day, we decided to pick up some stuff at the local grocery store. When I was walking down the aisle, a man approached my mom and I. He was tall and bald. I can't remember much about his appearance. I was about 13 years old. He asked my mom if she had any other children, to which she replied, yes, my brother of 4 at the time. However, keep in mind, all she said was she had a 4-year-old. Anyhow, the man gave her some business cards and told me to have a nice day. They seemed incredibly nice in my opinion. About a week later, my mom and I were at the store again. And yes, we rode bike there. The man was there, but he was walking around with an empty shopping cart. He called out to my mom. My mom kept nudging me to leave. Elizabeth. Wait. He yelled. He approached us and asked how Sebastian, my brother, was. My mom said he was fine, but we were in a hurry. So she told him we had to leave. She had a panic look on her face when we got outside. So I asked her what was wrong. She told me that she never told him my brother's name. That's when things started getting weird. Later that night, we went back to the store in a car this time. It was raining, but we never got to buy anything either. Because we left. When we got there, the man was still there. He was still walking around with an empty shopping cart. My mom was creeped out. So she told me we'd come back in the morning. When we got to the car, it was freezing. So what we were waiting for the car to heat up. Someone knocked on the car window. It was the man. I started screaming and my mom put the car in reverse. When she reversed, the man ran in front of the car. She lowered her window a bit and told him to leave. I just want to talk to you, he would shout. But my mom just drove around him. Finally, the next morning, we decided to go back to the store. We walked there. And we got there. And yeah, the strange man was there. My mom went up to a security guard and told him everything. The security guard said he'd noticed the man a while back and has been waiting for someone to make a formal complaint. He said he knew exactly who the man was. It turns out he was just released from a mental hospital, and his son was in jail for rape. He told us that he always comes to hit on women and stays there all day without ever buying anything. The officer then made a call and told us he'd watch out for the man to make sure he didn't follow us out. And we were crossing the street out of the grocery store parking lot. About 7 cop cars showed up and pulled out in front of the grocery store. The next time we went to the store, my mom asked the security guard what had happened. And he told us the man was taken into custody. Apparently they had a warrant for his arrest. And he had a stolen gun on his person.